In a moment, I'm going to share with you the miracle on the Delaware. I'll be right back. The rebellion had been thoroughly crushed. On December 8, 1776, General George Washington took what was left of his battered troops and made his escape across the Delaware River into Pennsylvania. As the last Americans began to cross the river, the first redcoat pursuers arrived at the riverbank. However, they were unable to follow the worn-out Americans because Washington had had the foresight to take with him every boat within 50 miles. Freedom's dream appeared to be dead. Washington's troops had dwindled to about 5,000 soldiers, and with enlistments about to retire at the first of the year, he might only be left with 1,200 regular soldiers. The one bright spot for the worn-out Americans was that the overconfident British had decided to hold up for the winter and to take care of what was left of these rebels come spring. British General William Howe took his troops to New York City to spend the winter months in relative ease and comfort. He did, however, leave a garrison of German mercenaries behind in Trenton, New Jersey. These mercenaries were called Hessians. Now, the Hessians expected Washington to attack, and because of that expectation, they had been on alert for 24 hours a day for more than a week, and they were exhausted. But at mid-afternoon, Christmas Day, Washington did not disappoint them, because he and his 2,400 troops that he took with him began marching 9 miles up to McConkey's Ferry. At 6 p.m., General Washington wrote in his diary, "It is fearfully cold and raw, and a snowstorm setting in. The wind is northeast and beats in the faces of the men. It will be a terrible night for the soldiers who have no shoes. Some of them have old rags tied around their feet, but I have not heard a man complain." During the darkness of night and a storm mixed with snow, rain, and hail, Washington and his troops began crossing the Delaware River. It took nearly 9 hours for the entire Continental Army to reach the other side. By 4 a.m., all had crossed. The Patriots were worn out, they were exhausted, they were wet, they were cold. But Washington urged his men forward, and the march continued. Some of the troops left a trail of blood from their bare, exposed feet, but they continued on. When the attack began, the Hessians were taken completely by surprise, even though they had expected such an attack. The Americans got the upper hand immediately, but then the Hessians began to reform and re-establish themselves. At that point, Washington ordered American artillery captain Alexander Hamilton to fire the cannons at point-blank range. The battle was over within 2 hours. And on that day, Washington and his troops captured or killed 1,000 Hessian soldiers and confiscated many much-needed supplies. Washington then took his troops, his prisoners, and those added supplies back up to McConkey's Ferry, where they crossed the Delaware River again victoriously. But what would have happened if Washington and his men had not moved forward? What would have happened if they would have given up and said it was done? We tried this thing, but we couldn't win. Well, aren't you glad that freedom's dream was kept alive? I sure am. And it is up to us to make sure that we keep freedom's dream continuing alive, to continue to push forward, to keep our freedom, because freedom is not free. But just like that dream, many of us have our own individual dreams living inside of us. A dream to achieve something, to go beyond yourself. And you may be thinking about quitting today. Well, I encourage you to think of those patriots. Those patriots who walked barefoot with their feet bleeding so that we may have the opportunity to dream and to achieve success. Let's keep those dreams alive as well. This is Mark Bowser. Thanks for listening.